If you want to feel more connected to humanity and a little less alone, listen to Beautiful Anonymous. Each week, I take a phone call from one random anonymous human being. There's over 400 episodes in our back catalog. You get to feel connected to all these different people all over the world. Recent episodes include one where a lady survived a murder attempt by her own son. But then the week before that, we just talked about Star Trek. It can be anything. It's unpredictable. It's raw. It's real. Get Beautiful Anonymous wherever you listen to podcasts.
I just don't understand how you go on vacation without hunting a human.
Okay, it's not like they give out brochures for that, Tom.
Not in the hotels you stay in, maybe.
There's plenty of them.
No.
Oh, okay, how about this one?
Obviously, Noah, look at the tear marks.
Oh, no, right, clearly.
Hey, Eli, I'm going to regret asking this, but what is with the jars of dicks?
Oh, hey, guys. Well, so you know how this week's episode's about John Dillinger, whose giant penis is famously on display at the Smithsonian? I figured I'd get out my own Dixium.
That's not a real thing.
Okay, Eli, first of all, that's an urban legend. Dillinger's penis is not on display at the Smithsonian. Mm-hmm. And secondly, Dixium?
Yeah.
Dick, you're going with that?
You know how we always die in the little intro sketches that we do for our show?
Yeah,
Well, as soon as I come back, I usually harvest the dicks, just sort of as a fun hobby. And, this wall's my Tom's. That over there is my Noah's. That small shelf there is my Heath's.
Oof.
Hard to get him before he rips them off in an incestuous
It's an average
way.
shelf.
I see.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
He does that a lot. Yeah.
Great. Love this. Yeah, missed this bit. This is fun.
Okay. But, Eli, do you not keep my dick?
Oh, I do. I don't put them in jars.
Okay, well, what do you do with them?
Hey, you know what? See, that's actually not important. You guys ready to do a podcast? Let's do some podcasting.
Sure.
let's go.
Yeah, okay. That's what we're here for.
I guess.
Guys, wait. Eli, no, it's very important to me that you answer this question. What do you do with my dicks, Eli? They're gone. Fuck.
Hello and welcome. Citation Needed, a podcast where we choose a subject, read a single article about it on Wikipedia, and pretend we're experts. Because this is the internet, and that's how it works now. I'm Heath, and I'll be leading this very diverse gang of criminals. We have Mr. White, and Mr. White. Caesar, Noah, Eli, and Tom.
Well, I'll have you know I'm Mr. White in the streets, but I'm also Mr. White in the sheets.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And I'm the only one here who's cut a guy's ear off, so I want my own nickname. This is not fair.
Yeah, right? And on a related note, what?
I wanted to be Mr. Black, but I'm not. I'm definitely not.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so Tom, what person, place, thing, concept, phenomenon, or event are we going to be talking about today and changing the subject?
We're going to be talking about John Dillinger.
Fantastic. And how'd you pick that topic?
All right. Well, months ago, actually, I marked this topic in our schedule to claim it. Not because I knew all the details of the story, but because I knew that I wanted to. I vaguely knew Dillinger was a sort of local Chicago criminal folk hero, and I thought it'd be a fun hometown ye olde crime story. And I'm also kind of ashamed to admit that I had him mixed up in my mind with Pretty Boy Floyd, who is not at all actually to be confused with Dillinger, or in fact, the many, many other high-profile bank robbers that would come to define celebrity crime in the 1930s. There's a fucking lot of them, actually. Dillinger was a bank robber for sure, but his exploits are so much more insane than just sticking up a few banks, and the nationwide manhunt for Dillinger would actually become the event that legitimized the nascent federal agency we now known as the FBI.
Yeah. Also, we're contractually obligated to have an episode where the FBI did a thing right. So this sort of...
And that bureau would stay legitimized for another 83 years.
Well, don't get too excited. They don't actually acquit themselves very well in this story, actually.
No.
Yeah, did they do a thing right here?
Yeah.
No, I wrote my jokes in order.
So John Dillinger was born in 1903 to John Wilson Dillinger and Molly Dillinger in Indianapolis, Indiana. The elder Dillinger was described as a harsh man who subscribed to the spare the rod, spoil the child ethos of child rearing. which is, I think, Wikipedia's clumsy sideways way of saying he was a religious nut who beat the shit out of his kids. Just before John turned 4, his mother Molly quite rudely died, and John was raised for a time by his sister, who was 14 years older than John and married. John was raised for several years this way until his father remarried, and John again moved back to live with his dad.
Hey, can you look after your little brother? The in-house help died and I have to rehire. It's a whole thing.
That's really how you have to read that, too. It's fucked up. Now, you might think that the untimely death of his mother and the shuttling back and forth between caregivers at a young age would be readily offset by the religious fatherly beatings, but strangely enough, Dillinger never really seemed to get the hang of normal life. As a teenager, he was described, and I'm quoting here because I don't know what else in the world it means, he was described as having a, quote, bewildering personality.
Oh, Tom, in my experience, people start saying that if you ask if you can safely fuck the toasters in the question section on Amazon. You just go through all the toasters and do it. They start saying that.
Fair.
Anybody was going to know.
Fair. Yeah. Still not sure how that affected Dillinger prior to Amazon 100 years back. Anyway, he was also a violent bully who was also often in trouble for fighting and petty theft, 2 traits which don't lend themselves well to the boundaries of a traditional school setting. So naturally, teenage John Dillinger quit school to work in a machine shop.
I'm sorry, petty theft is a weird fucking term, is it not? It sort of contains an unstated challenge to think bigger, doesn't it?
Still, all the fighting and stealing and wild behavior just wouldn't stop. And John Dillinger Sr. thought he knew just why. He feared that big city of Indianapolis was corrupting his impressionable son. So he packed up all their shit and he moved the family to Mooresville in 1921. And as everyone knows, if you've got a rambunctious teenager that just isn't responding to a good Christian ass whooping, the best thing to do is to isolate them socially by moving out into the middle of rural nowhere America. I mean, after all, if there's nothing to do all day, the mind of a troubled young man will naturally find a sort of internal peace, like a cornfield zen, if you will.
Yeah. Cornfield Zen? Yeah.
Right. Either that or the boredom itself will just add fuel to the internal drive to fuck shit up and he'll get arrested for auto theft. I mean, in this case, it was the second one. It was definitely the second.
Or it could have been either.
Yeah.
Well, or maybe both. He just sat still for an hour and he was like, cool, yeah. So time, definitely a flat circle. And I'm stealing this car now.
So by 1923, Dillinger was in trouble so frequently, he had no choice but to join the Navy.
Wait, what?
That's because back in the day, if you were a young man who couldn't seem to get their shit together, you would often be given a choice of enlistment or prison. Dillinger chose enlistment and was, very briefly, a petty officer third-class machinery repairman assigned to the USS Utah. Except that when the USS Utah docked a few months later in Boston, Dillinger deserted and was eventually dishonorably discharged.
Yeah, a few years later, the military would become much more meticulous, gathering recruits. A selective service, if you will. It would be selective.
You could just say gay guys, Cecil. You're being weird. It's okay. They know in the Navy. They know. It's okay.
John returned home to Mooresville, where he met and married Betty Ethel Hovius in 1924. But settling down was even harder than staying in the Navy, and very soon Dillinger was struggling. Unable to find work, despite a terrific resume of auto theft and desertion, Dillinger soon began to contemplate a more straightforward approach and began to plan a robbery with his friend Ed Singleton. And then Wikipedia just throws this little factoid out there and then never does anything with it, but it's kind of fascinating and it's total lack of follow-up, so I'm going to include it here. Ed Singleton was, quote, an ex-convict and umpire for a semi-professional baseball team, the AC Athletics, for which Dillinger played shortstop. End quote.
Really?
Nothing else about his athletic interest or career seems to be anywhere before or after this one moment, but I guess he was also a minor league shortstop for a hot minute.
Yeah, based on the time period, he was probably just in it for the racism, though, you know.
or the game fixing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Fair.
There was some
Both
cash
fair.
in that.
Both fair. So together, John and Ed robbed the local grocery store, making off with about $50, which is $800 in today's money. The robbery was not a smooth affair, however, and John Dillinger struck a man upside the head with a machinery bolt wrapped in a cloth, and he fired his gun sometime during the robbery, though nobody was shot.
What? The bolt in the cloth is weird. It feels like that guy who got hit made fun of the bolt wrapped in the cloth next to the gun, and Dillinger got mad. He's like, hey, fuck you. I spent a lot of time on this. You know how hard it is to find cheesecloth? You can't just get it everywhere.
On leaving the store, the pair were recognized by a local minister who reported the robbery, and the two men were arrested the following day.
Okay, so hey, pro tip. If a clergyman ever recognizes you during a crime, quickly confess that crime to him, and suddenly he's duty-bound to keep your secret.
Nice.
One simple trick. It's pretty great.
So John Dillinger Sr., well, he was a big swinging dick in Mooresville, Indiana, since he was the local church deacon, and he discussed his son's case with the prosecutor. John's compatriot, Ed, pleaded not guilty to the robbery, but after much discussion with his father, John confessed to the whole thing without a lawyer to represent him. It appears that John Sr. really thought he had worked something out with the prosecutor, but being a deacon is not the same thing as being an attorney, and a confession is basically prosecutor Viagra. So Dillinger was convicted of assault and battery with intent to rob and conspiracy to commit a felony, and was subsequently sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison.
Wow. Minister father, rural America, always in trouble. If before he goes to jail, he rage dances in a barn and does an uneven bar routine, we got a screenplay, folks. Screenplay.
Now, while he was being transported to testify against his friend Ed, Dillinger briefly escaped from the cops, but he was captured again in a few moments. Nevertheless, he marked this one on his bed.
So he just ran like 5 feet, and they were like, no. They just
I think so. They don't give a lot of detail about
Just
that
ran
at all.
around to the other side of the car. You have to put this in Wikipedia. You have to.
So nevertheless, he marked this one on his bedpost as a notch number 1. And Dillinger had no illusions about using his time in the penal system to try to become a better man and seek rehabilitation. He's quoted as saying, "I will be the meanest bastard you ever saw when I get out of here." He would not turn out to be wrong. Dillinger really thought he was going to get probation, not a sentence of a decade or more behind bars. The perceived injustice of his situation infuriated him, and he became deeply involved with some of the more dangerous elements of the career criminal set within the prison, including veteran bank robbers, and I love these names, Harry Pete Pierpont.
What?
It's short for Harry.
Comes from. Charles Mackley, Russell Clark, and Homer Van Meter.
Nice.
Van Meter took Dillinger under his wing and taught him, and this is a quote again from Wikipedia, how to be a successful criminal, end quote. A phrase I did quote because Van Meter was evidently holding forth on his criminal success while in prison.
Yeah. Okay, kid, new meat, fresh meat. Look at me here. Number 1, don't wind up in here.
Yep.
Okay, that's the extent of my lesson plan. Hey, that's all I got. The PowerPoint's
that's
over.
solid. That's solid. I guess that makes sense that
Clippy
it's
here
over.
now. The PowerPoint's done.
What was number 1 again?
Meanwhile, John Dillinger Sr., he felt like a huge dick for giving his son.
There it is. It makes its appearance.
He felt like a huge dick for giving his son terrible legal advice, and he worked on securing his release, even going so far as gathering 188 signatures for a petition for his son's release.
Okay, and that doesn't sound like much, but that's like almost 3,000 in today's signatures.
That's not at all clear how successful the petition was, but John Dillinger was paroled after 9.5 years, released from prison at the very height of the Depression in May of 1933. Dillinger almost immediately robbed a bank in Ohio, making off with $10,000, which was a shit ton of money. It's about $210,000 in today's currency.
He's just at the front desk of the jail getting paroled, getting released. Okay, you guys have my watch and my oversized bolt and my cheesecloth. I need them.
And before anybody listening who has a terrible soulless job gets any ideas, you can't make that much money robbing banks anymore. They keep it all locked in timed safes, and so you only get like a couple $100. I mean, don't steal. Stealing is bad. Don't steal.
Emboldened by that success and Certainly not yet in need of more money, Dillinger robbed another bank a month later in August of 1933. This time, however, John was caught by the police. When the cops were searching Dillinger before transferring John into the actual prison, they found a document that looked a hell of a lot like a prison escape plan. Authorities demanded that he tell them about the plan, but John was like, and spoil the surprise? Fuck you, no.
Okay, good arrest. You got me. Question, though, unrelated, completely unrelated. If I take a shit the size of a human being, is there like a network of pipes that flush it out? I don't know, past the fence?
Okay, wait, so no, I got an idea, though. Instead of bringing your fucking Wile E. Coyote escape from jail blueprints to your crime, maybe you focus on escape from the fucking crime without getting arrested blueprints. See, now this is what fucking happens when you take criminaling advice from a guy in prison.
Van Meter!
Oh, God. These pipes are really small. Yeah, I thought they were human size. This is ridiculous. It's like 4 inches.
And there were a lot of surprises in store. While John was in prison the first time, he hatched a scheme to break all of his buddies out of jail. And even though John had been paroled from that prison, he still made good on his plan. Dillinger had some friends from the outside smuggle guns into the old prison and into the hands of his buddies just 4 days after John had been rearrested. John's friends used the guns they had been provided to escape from the prison laundry. The group would be known as the First Dillinger Gang and consisted of Pete Pierpont, Russell Clark, Charles Mackley, Ed Schraus, Harry Copeland, and John Red Hamilton. The names are going to get a bit confusing from time to time, but Dillinger's friends were tight and they knew they owed their freedom to John.
Good thing you're in the laundry. You can disinfect the prison pocket pistol there.
Yeah, I mean, John's great and all, but I feel like they really owe their freedom to whoever snuck into Sing Sing with 6 dudes worth of guns shoved up his ass.
How do you even hold it? You got to hold it with just 2 fingers. You know what I mean? Like, how do you do that? How do you aim?
The guy looks a lot like a Transformer, right? Is it just me? Got a real Megatron vibe.
So this part is fucking bonkers to me. 3 of the newly sprung criminals then made their way to the prison where Dillinger was being held. A spectacularly ballsy move since they had just broken out of prison themselves. And they then pretended that they were Indiana State Police, there to extradite John back to Indiana. When the sheriff at the prison asked for their credentials, they shot him dead, walked into the prison, found Dillinger, released him from his cell, and then the 4 men walked the fuck out and went back to Indiana to meet up with the rest of their crew.
Were like the other guards part of an alien hive mind? The sheriff dies, they just run around screaming in confusion. I don't know what this. Nobody's telling me to guard or not.
That's just how a lot of extradition cases were settled back then. It was just,
Now, that Dillinger gang would go on to rob at least 12 banks beginning in June of 1934. And these were not quiet affairs. Sometimes people were killed in the process. Fairly quickly, Dillinger and company were captured in Tucson, Arizona. John was extradited, for realsies this time, back to Indiana to face charges for the murder of a policeman killed during a robbery. The local police bragged about the security of their prison, which is a very weird thing to do since you would think security in a prison should be something of a given. It took Dillinger only 3 months to escape.
Okay. Well, apparently you could escape from prison with a placemat from Long John Silver's at this point. Great. Hopefully they'll tighten that up a little. We'll find out after a quick break for some apropos of nothing.
And now I imagine a little maze with John Dillinger in the middle, and you've got to get him.
Now, the thing you get at Long John Silver's, a human-sized shit. That's what you get.
John Jr., my boy.
Oh, hey, Dad. What are you doing here?
Look, John, I know you ain't the biggest fan of your pappy, but I done you a right turn, and I hope that you use it to make yourself a better man.
You did?
I did. I walked right into that prosecutor's office with your signed confession, and I told him to set my boy
Wait,
free and on
sorry.
the path of righteousness.
Sorry, you what? I didn't sign a confession.
He didn't need to. I did all the writing for you. Then I looked up that prosecutor right in the eye, and I said, I think we understand each other.
Okay, and
then I left.
Then you left. Wow. You needed to be just so much more explicit about the details of what was going to happen
Come
here.
on, John. There's a way these things are done among men.
Is there? I feel like that's not a thing. I feel like you just made up a phrase.
Me. Would you set your boot leather in a man's office and lock eyes with his pocket watch? Time ticks to a different tune, by dandy.
None of that made any sense.
Look,
Those are
John,
just nonsense words.
I know I haven't always ripened the fig as the daydream dances, but I tell you, you're going to corner your whisper before Will-O-Wisp can sing a creep-crawl on a Jamie's eye.
It's not even English at the end there. I don't know what you're saying.
Hey, Dillinger, you're up! Judge says you gave a full confession, so get real comfy in this jail, boy!
Why, sprangle, spredoodle.
I hate you so much.
Wham, wham.
And we're back. When we left off, John Dillinger had a bazooka inside a giant hollowed out Bible, I guess. And he's about to break out of prison. What's next?
Okay, you're pretty close. On March 3rd, 1934, Dillinger produced a pistol during morning exercise.
Nothing up my sleeve.
This took rather everyone by surprise since guns were something of a no-no for the general prisoner population.
Sure.
John was able to leave prison without firing a single shot, which was rather a good thing since it is also not entirely clear that the gun was actually real. According to Sam Cahoon, a trustee that Dillinger took hostage during his escape, the gun was actually carved from a piece of shelving from his cell.
What?
The FBI files corroborate. Yeah, FBI files corroborate that story, though the local police with the super secure jail totally insist it was a real gun.
Listen, it had a flag that said bang when it shot. It was fucking real. This is serious.
I'll show you. Let me take the photos down from my gun. I mean shelf. I'll show you. Let me just get this.
His shelf has a gun-shaped cutout on it. I don't know.
All his books are just balanced on guns along the walls. Okay. I see the issue here.
A nationwide manhunt was launched to catch Dillinger, and the Bureau of Investigations, the precursor to the FBI, was taking the lead. None of this mattered much to the unflappable Dillinger, who left prison and immediately sought out his girlfriend, Evelyn Billy Frechette. Together, Dillinger and Evelyn traveled to Minneapolis, where they stayed for a couple of weeks before meeting up with John Red Hamilton, who had been recovering from bullet wounds he received at the last Dillinger gang robbery. Reunited, Dillinger and Red assembled a new gang, joining up with that of Babyface Nelson. The Nelson-Dillinger combo gang robbed a bank in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and a week later, they robbed a bank in Mason City, Iowa.
See, that's the problem with celebrity collaborations like that. Everybody's suddenly trying too hard, right?
On March 20th, 1934, Dillinger and Evelyn moved into an apartment in St. Paul, Minnesota, under the aliases Mr. and Mrs. Carl T. Hellman.
Okay.
The landlord.
They had the mayo and they saw it and they made that up.
They brought out their best. The landlord, one Daisy Coffey, was suspicious of her new tenant and spied on the pair from across the complex under the guise of refurnishing the opposite unit. On March the 30th, Daisy filed a report at the FBI's St. Paul field office, giving information about the couple and identifying their vehicle. You would think at this point that maybe the jig was up. The FBI placed the building under surveillance by two agents, but, and here I'm going to quote right from the wiki because it is so fucking absurd, quote, they saw nothing unusual, mainly because the blinds were drawn.
Traps!
All right, we bugged the place too. All we heard was Lou doing normal apartment stuff. So I don't know how we're fucking catching this guy.
Yeah, sorry, I should clarify from earlier. We're contractually obligated to talk about the time the FBI tried to do a thing but were confounded by Venetian blinds. That's
Right. Guys, this is the case that legitimized them.
It's true. It's so sad. So the next day, the two agents knocked on the door of the apartment and Evelyn answered, but she only opened the door like a couple of inches, claiming she wasn't decent. And she asked the officers to come back another time. The FBI agents, and I'm not making this up, they were like, no, that's cool. We'll just wait here while you get dressed. So after a few minutes, one of the officers decided he needed to call back to the home base for help. But it's fucking 1934. So he had to go to someone's apartment in the building and ask to use their phone. And after he got back, they continued to just wait in the hallway for Evelyn to finish getting dressed when they encountered Van Meter walking toward the apartment. Now, if you don't recall, Van Meter was one of the Dillinger gang. Facing each other in the hall, a very strange exchange took place. Van Meter, trying to be inconspicuous and smooth, asked the first agent, is your name Johnson? When the agent replied that it was not, he then insisted on a name from Van Meter. And Van Meter was like, oh, me? I'm a soap salesman. And so then the FBI guy naturally expressed some confusion about his noticeable absence of saleable soap. Then they both kind of looked at each other. And then Van Meter turns around and heads down the stairs. And after a few seconds, one of the agents follows Van Meter down the steps, whereupon Van Meter turns around and begins shooting at him.
You asked my name? It's soap. I sell vans and meters. Okay, bye. And the cops were like, yeah, checks out.
checks out. Okay.
Wait a minute.
Why did he ask the agent's name as his cold open? Was he hoping to trip him up with that zinger?
What's your name?
Shit, is my name Johnson?
He's like, soap sales. Yeah, it worked.
So the shots missed, and the two ran around for a bit. It gets kind of confusing, and Van Meter ran toward his car. The other agents recognized what was happening, so they shut out the back tire to disable it. Meanwhile, they still needed backup, so one of the agents ran to the corner store to call the local cops and to try the field office again. And I love this, but he couldn't get through because their lines were busy. Van Meter then jumped onto a passing coal truck and got away. What? I don't even know.
That's
For
so
his
Charlie Chaplin of him.
It's so ridiculous.
He just grabbed onto a 2x4 being driven by a guy on a bicycle. And
They were going to try to chase him across the street, but there were guys carrying glass and the whole thing. For his part, Dillinger began firing a Thompson submachine gun out the window of the apartment, eventually coming out of the apartment and then trading shots with the agents. Neither of the agents were hit by the submachine gun, but Dillinger was shot in the calf. Despite the injury, the agents were outgunned and out of ammo, and Dillinger and Evelyn escaped out the back door and drove away.
Oh, why are we even wearing three-piece suits if we're not going to carry extra bullets? I hate now. I hate it. So many pockets.
So the problem was, of course, that getting shot means you now need a doctor. So Dillinger headed to his buddy Eddie Green's place in Minneapolis. Eddie had a sneaky side doctor buddy who was happy to help for the promised fee of $500 for both his services and his discretion. Eddie was shot and killed by the FBI just a couple of days later, and on April 4th, after 5 days of convalescing, Dillinger was again on the move. The doctor was never paid for his service.
Okay, I'll go ahead and say it. That theft was petty. I stand corrected.
Evelyn and Dillinger left Minneapolis to return to Mooresville, Indiana, to see Dillinger's father.
Smart. The cops would never think to look for him there.
Right.
They then spent a couple of very strange days visiting the parents of other gang members, driving hundreds of miles to see the parents of gangster Henry Pierpont. On April 7th at 3:30 in the morning, Dillinger and his half-brother Hubert rammed a car in Noblesville, Indiana after falling asleep at the wheel. They then careened off the road through a farm fence before coming to a stop a couple of 100 yards into the woods. The pair then ditched the car and headed back to Mooresville on foot. Police swarmed the accident site, recognizing the car that Dillinger had been driving. And in that car, they found maps, a machine gun magazine, a length of rope, and a bullwhip, And here again, I'm going to quote directly from the wiki. Quote, according to Hubert, his brother planned to pay a visit with the bullwhip to his former one-armed shyster lawyer.
Lots of
John,
questions.
honey, come on. We have to hit the road. We got to get to Grandma's house. Give me a minute. I got to find my bullwhip, man.
The order of that sentence is so weird. But sorry, former one-armed shyster. So now he's no armed.
Yeah. Or he got one. Yeah.
Right, he got one back. Right, that's the approach.
That was what the whip is for. He was going to use that as a prosthetic. He was going to have a whip arm.
Give
Whip
me the
people with it.
keys, you cocksucker.
Dillinger and Evelyn needed new wheels, and so they used a pseudonym and bought a Ford V8. I only mention this because at this point, Dillinger had become so famous that brands had begun unofficially using the Dillinger name in their actual advertising.
That's
Ford was
amazing.
no exception. On learning that Dillinger had bought the powerful Ford V8, Ford began using the slogan, "Will they catch John Dillinger? Not
Nice.
until they get him out of a Ford V8.
That's amazing.
Next commercial is just like, okay, well, the cops bought some Ford V8s from us. Now it's a tie. Still exciting.
But he had a
Dillinger
head
usually
start,
leaves a little bit first. So, they're not gaining or losing.
Dillinger again escaped capture on April 8th when, under surveillance by the FBI, the Dillingers were having a family picnic. Dillinger and Evelyn suspected that they were under watch by the feds, so they hatched a daring plan. You see, instead of Dillinger driving the big, recognizable car, Evelyn drove while Dillinger crouched out of sight on the floor. And their wacky plan worked.
What?
And
Why would that work?
I have no idea. A female motorist. Dillinger and Evelyn escaped out from under the noses of the FBI again, this time heading to Chicago.
All right, Dillinger's getting into the car, and he vanished. He vanished. It's just a lady now. It's a female motorist. I don't even know what the fuck. We're going to head back to the office. This is ridiculous.
We have some
lost him.
major suspender snapping to do. We got to really snap our suspenders about this.
We are heavily funded.
A luck, however, had run out for Evelyn. The following day, Dillinger was supposed to meet some guys at a tavern in Chicago. Evelyn went in before John, however, and she was immediately arrested, which honestly seems really stupid since they were really after John and now they just spooked him. Dillinger was beside himself at the capture of Evelyn, and he began to talk about breaking Evelyn out of custody. Most of Dillinger's gang tried to talk him out of it, but Van Meter, the guy who was not a convincing soap salesman, thought this was a fine idea. If they had bulletproof vests, that is. Good idea with bulletproof
Don't
vests.
worry, John. I have this bit where I ask them their name. It works 100% of the time.
No, trust me. I'll bring the soap samples this time. It'll have everything.
So while Dillinger didn't have a bulletproof vest of his own, Van Meter knew where they could get some. You see, cops have lots of bulletproof vests. So if you need them, you just need to rob the cops, which they did. Van Meter and Dillinger took hostage a police officer named Judd Pittenger, and they marched him into the police station at gunpoint. And once in the station, they robbed the police station of all their guns and bulletproof vests.
Okay.
And while
I mean, you could just
successful-
shoot the, commissioner and all the rest of the cops apparently fall on the ground or run around screaming.
I'm the commissioner
I guess that
now.
works too.
And while successful, it turns out that robbing a police station and taking a cop hostage brings rather a lot of heat. So the gang again had to move, this time heading to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to stay with the sister of one of the gang members.
Did they know they could stay at other places other than family members' houses?
Right?
They did
It
not.
seems like they'd start to run out at a certain point, right? They're just on the phone. Hey, second cousin Murray twice removed. Can we crash with you? We're doing a crime thing. And hello?
So after hiding out for a time in Michigan, the gang then moved to a small vacation lodge in Wisconsin called Little Bohemia. The Bureau of Investigation got a tip the gang was hiding out there and headed over to check it out. As they approached, a car with 3 men in it began driving off. The agents yelled for the car to stop, but the men in the car were too drunk to listen and kept driving. The agents opened fire on the car, killing the driver. They didn't stop. So as you could just shoot them, I guess.
Stop resisting.
1930. Dillinger and the gang were actually upstairs when they heard the commotion, and so they began shooting out of the windows at the agents. The agents ran for cover, and Dillinger and the gang all escaped out the back of the lodge again.
Cool. Yeah. And then, like, I don't know, a bunch of decades later, law enforcement would learn about, the back of stuff.
Would they, Heath? Would they?
Not exactly. No.
At this point, the pressure to catch Dillinger and company was intense. And so Dillinger headed once more to Chicago, hoping that the size of the city would offer him some anonymity. It worked.
Well, no, yeah, that's Chicago's superpower, not mattering.
So for months, the FBI had no leads on Dillinger, and Dillinger was able to lead a somewhat quiet life, this time under the alias Jimmy Lawrence. The FBI finally figured out that Dillinger was in town when they stumbled upon his blood-soaked getaway car abandoned in a Chicago alley.
Okay, but that's pretty common for every alley in Chicago. Did they find a bullwhip in the car? Was it like something that led him to Dillinger?
If Dillinger was going to have any hope of evading arrest, he was going to need to make some changes. Surgical changes.
Huh?
To obscure his appearance, John Dillinger sought out plastic surgery to alter his face and remove his
I'm
fingerprints.
sure we were getting to
Invented
the
plastic?
dick at this point. Yeah,
This is insane. Now, this section of the wiki is kind of a mess, and it has citation needed flags just all over it. But from what I can gather, Dillinger had his first plastic surgery to remove 2 distinctive facial moles, remove his dimples in his cheeks, and alter the shape of his mouth. Now, it was 1934, so this, of course, was a fucking nightmare, and he was immediately nearly killed with an overdose of ether. The cure for this, by the way, when he started overdosing, was to grab his tongue with forceps and pull while jamming their elbows into Dillinger's
his ribs, yeah.
until he stopped suffocating somehow from the ether overdose. I don't know why that worked, but it did. Though notably, Dillinger continued with surgeries under local rather than general anesthetic from that point on.
Hey,
Lightweight.
Doc, thanks for, almost killing me and then saving my life. Well, from you, saving my life from you. But now I look like a Dick Tracy bad guy? You see how that's not helpful, right? That's like the opposite of helpful.
I mean, a bunch of Dick Tracy villains are based on you, John. So no, I don't see how that's actually.
Oh, I'm going to blend?
Yeah.
All right.
So Van Meter eventually wanted in on the surgery game too. And the pair then employed a small team of surgeons. They alternated procedures and doctors from chair to couch as needed in a bid to alter their appearances. They also had their fingertips removed. And once more, I want to quote from the wiki directly, just because this sounds so insane to me. The procedure was to, quote, expose the lower skin. In other words, take off the epidermis and expose the derma. Then alternately, the acid and the alkaloid was applied as was necessary to produce the desired results, end quote. That sounds to me like they fucking peeled their fingers like bananas and then chemically burned them smooth. That's what they sounded like. The doctors charged $100 a finger for that work. The doctors were then also all arrested fairly quickly, and one of them fell to his death from the 19th floor of a building while in police custody. I'm guessing he might have been the black doctor.
Oh,
It didn't say.
no.
Pretty sure that's true, though. All that surgery didn't save Van Meter either, who was shot dead in an alley in St. Paul, Minnesota that August by the chief of police.
How is that even helpful to do that to your fingerprints? If the cops arrest the guy and he has none fingerprints, he's a fucking bad guy, right?
Well, and so even worse, now the cops have records of your prints at all the crime scenes.
Now, remember how broken up Dillinger was when his girl got arrested? Like, he was so distraught that he robbed a police station and then didn't do shit for her after that. Yeah, well, evidently he never stopped pining for her because in a very weird, gross twist, Dillinger met in June of 34 Polly Hamilton, a former teen runaway and prostitute who looked an awful lot like Evelyn. So the two started seeing each other fairly quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did they start courting Tom? Did he leave his calling card at her child brothel in hopes of accompanying her to the opera?
Calm down, Eli. He said former teen. It's like a former one-eyed.
That's true. Yeah.
Shyster lawyer.
She was now
She wasn't a
one-armed
teen when they started.
shyster lawyer.
Right. Yeah, to be clear, I don't think that she was still a teen when they started seeing each other. But Polly, Dillinger's new girlfriend, who looked just like his old girlfriend, used to work at a brothel run by a Romanian immigrant named Anya Cumpanias. Anya was in some trouble with the law and was facing deportation for her work as a madam. So she agreed to work with the FBI in exchange for not being deported. Oh, and I didn't write this part. After all this work, they still deport her. I just want to point that out. They still fucking deport her at the end. Anya and Polly were still friends. So Anya agreed to meet up with Polly and Dillinger to see a show. This next part seriously all sounds like it comes from a budget film noir screenwriting class. So that the police would be able to easily spot her, Anya agreed to wear a bright orange dress the afternoon of the outing. The only problem was that Anya wasn't able to tell the FBI which theater they were going to until the last minute. You see, there were two options. There was the Biograph and the Marlboro. When Dillinger told her he wanted to see something at the Biograph, Anya invented an excuse to run to the store to buy butter to make them all some fried chicken. And while at the store, she called her handlers, and importantly, she bought the butter.
It's really specific.
The Biograph. Oh, that's a fried chicken theater. Yeah, that's. I will be back in a second wearing a safety vest. Don't worry about it.
Now, that evening, the trio went to the Biograph as planned. And the FBI was so good at staking the place out unobserved that the theater manager totally observed them and then called the cops thinking that they were there to rob the place. The FBI then had to wave off the cops without alerting Dillinger and Polly, who were watching the crime drama of the Manhattan melodrama. Once that was done, they waited for the movie to end and for Dillinger to file out, at which point the agent, who had his eyes on Dillinger, signaled to the rest that he was on the move by lighting a cigarette. And as he was exiting, somehow, Dillinger made the feds, and he quickly moved ahead of the ladies before reaching into his pocket for his gun and taking off running down a nearby alley.
The agent who just learned about the back of things is like, well, fuck, now they have sides too? Jesus.
How many dimensions are there? This is ridiculous.
This is why we need a bureau, guys. This is why.
3 agents pursued Dillinger down the alley, and they shot at him multiple times. He was hit 4 times. 2 of the shots just grazed him. They did very little damage. The bullet that killed him struck him in the back of the neck, killed him pretty much immediately. The heroic FBI agents also shot 2 random women who were just nearby and had to be taken to the hospital. The FBI's first nationwide manhunt had ended, and Dillinger's insane streak of capture, escape, and close calls had come to an end. Dillinger had, at this point, become such a celebrity that throngs of gross, shitty people mobbed the pool of blood in the alley, seeking to dip their handkerchiefs, skirts, and newspapers in it to get us skirts. Right? Real gross. Real gross. To
Yeah,
get a
it's
souvenir.
reasonable with a newspaper or a
newspaper, I
handkerchief.
get
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah, right.
Thank you. You're not wearing that later. To get a souvenir of the dead criminal. Very weirdly for a criminal, also, John Dillinger's body was put on display for public view. Over 15,000 people. Okay, Eli, the dick story never happened. It was all because his arm was in an upward position, but when they took the picture, it looked like he had an enormous erection.
Yeah.
Over 15,000 people came to see the body of John Dillinger as it lay in the morgue of Cook County. There was some controversy about whether or not Dillinger actually died that night. And in 2019, guys, there was a plan to exhume the body. That plan was subsequently scrapped because it was fucking stupid.
Mm-hmm.
The History Channel was actively feeding the conspiracy because that's just what we do now. But I'm guessing that 2020 had plans of its own that rather eclipsed this little tidbit of trivia. In any case, I think the important thing to remember here is that at the height of a terrible national crisis, we were all too glad to deify anyone who is willing to take vengeance on the institutions that so grossly failed the people, even if those people were immoral murderers without any noticeable redeeming qualities.
All right, Tom, if you had to summarize what you've learned in one sentence, what would it be?
that Dillinger is not the same person as Pretty Boy Floyd. I will forget the rest of the details, but just different people.
You learned a lot.
Did
That was in the
different stuff. I did.
first
Yeah.
sentence, I think. All right, are you ready for the quiz?
Let's do it.
All right, Tom. Hollywood loves John Dillinger's story, so much so that they've made several biographical films about him, including Guns Don't Argue, The Lady in Red, Dillinger, Young Dillinger, and Public Enemies. But which of the following movies did Hollywood reject?
Okay.
A, one where John fights off infection called Penicillinger. B, one where they resurrect him into the modern day using his DNA from the preserved penis. That was called Dylan Jurassic Park.
So good.
Or C, one where Pauly Shore gets him acquitted called Dylan Jury Duty.
Okay. You said Pauly Shore, so I don't like that one.
Well, it can't be A because in 1934, nobody was fighting off a lot of infections. So I don't think that was probably the case. Pauly Shore is never the answer. So it's got to be B.
Oh, well done. Yes, that is correct. You figured it out.
All right, Tom.
Yes.
You managed to cover the fact that he was a shortstop baseball player. His friend's failed attempt at being a soap salesman and left out the tremendous amount of speculation around John Dillinger's penis in this essay. Why? A, you hate me. B, you hate comedy. C, largely untrue.
Largely.
Yeah.
As if that ever stopped us.
Right.
D, you didn't want to disrupt your counterfeit dark web penis in a jar business.
Okay. Well, first of all, we're not supposed to talk about D. You said that when we became business partners.
That's true.
That's a little rude. But obviously it's A. I do hate you.
That's fair.
Yeah.
How do you buy penises on the dark web with naughty Bitcoin?
I can get you Joe Rogan's penis. I'm just saying.
All right, Tom. What other brands profited off of John Dillinger's popularity? A, Bullwhip Topping. B, I Can't Believe You Got Butter. Or C, the Chevy Bolt Rag Top.
Oh.
Those are all good, but it's got to be B. I can't believe you got butter is great.
It is, yes, that's true. It is B.
All right. Well, Eli wins because I said so.
Yeah!
Eli, congratulations.
That's how this
I
game
want
works.
Noah to do an essay next week.
Oh.
All right. Well, for Tom, Noah, Cecil, and Eli, I'm Heath. Thank you for hanging out with us today. We'll be back next week, and by then, Noah will be an expert on something else. Between now and then, you can hear Tom and Cecil on Cognitive Dissonance, and you can hear Eli, Noah, and myself on God Awful Movies, Scathing Atheist, The Skeptocrat, and D&D Minus. And if you'd like to become a better person, you can make a per-episode donation at patreon.com/citationpod. And if you want to get in touch with us, listen to past episodes, connect with us on social media, or take a look at the show notes, check out citationpod.com.
If you donate enough, we'll preserve your penis in a jar.
Sure.
It's really big. If you
We
have a
might
penis,
already
that
be
is.
doing that.
Fred, you're taken care of, buddy.
We're planning on that. You choose the body part. Not everybody's got a penis. You tell us what you want preserved.
We'll put it in a jar.
Gee, I don't know, Floppy. I'm scared of the dark. Don't be scared, Eli. We can do anything if we do it together. Oh, we can do anything.
Hey, Eli, have you seen... Oh, my God, dude.
Don't you knock. You don't knock.
Never mind.
Yeah,
Never mind.
that's right. Never mind. Sorry, Floppy. You were saying